caffeinated, and more importantly, we hope that you've downloaded the LMA app. We hope that because we're going to be using the polling function today, which is why we're also joined by the lovely Clarice here, who is helping me, who does not have tech app experience. You won't be hearing me talk about that in my bio today. So thank you, Clarice. So if you haven't already, you can download that app on your phone, and you'll see if you go to the schedule and click on this session, at the bottom right of the app, you'll see a little speech bubble, and that's where you'll see the polling questions that we'll be asking you all to answer. So again, thank you for coming today. My name is Arielle Lapiano. I lead the PR function at Paul Hastings, which also includes overseeing the firm's recognition strategy for awards, directories, and surveys, or as I like to call it, ego management. I was previously a reporter, where part of my job was also to weed through submissions and various awards at the publications I worked with. So I've been working in the submission business in one way or another for some time. If we have any people here who are social media savvy and want to tweet, my handle is at a Lapiano. Now, much more importantly, our panel. We have right here to my right, Nigel Savage. Nigel is the founder and managing director of Savage Communications, a leading consultancy dedicated to rankings and directories. He has run and managed Legal 500 US, which he was also instrumental in launching. And he was a senior marketing position at Morrison & Foerster, where his focus was exclusively on managing the firm's global strategy towards rankings, awards, and directories. His Twitter handle is at SAV, COMMS. We also have Cindy Larson. Cindy is the publisher of Super Lawyers magazines nationwide and an inventor of the Super Lawyers patented selection process. She oversees the editorial of Super Lawyers and also the print distribution, strategy, and negotiations. She was previously the director of research for Super Lawyers and was responsible for selecting those named to Super Lawyers lists. She has a JD from the University of Minnesota Law School and practiced commercial litigation in Minneapolis before entering this lovely world of legal publishing. You can, if you want to tweet about all the fabulous things that Cindy's going to say, please use at Super Lawyers. And finally, we have Laura Mills. Laura is the editor of Chambers USA Guide. She's been in that role since 2011. She is originally from Buffalo, New York, and graduated with a BA in History and Middle Eastern Studies from the University of Pittsburgh, and an MA in Middle Eastern Studies from the School of Oriental and African Studies at the University of London. Please use Twitter handle at Chambers Guides for Laura. So we're all here today to hopefully give you some very actionable tips on how to put together a successful submission. We'll cover the do's and perhaps more importantly the don'ts, and hope that that will cover a lot of the questions you may have come here with today. And if it doesn't, please raise your hand so that we can answer the questions that you may have. We really have a great opportunity today to hear from the architects, the decision makers, and some of the most strategic thinkers as it relates to these submissions. So we're hoping that it will be a very informative discussion. So we've given you a little sense of our backgrounds, and we'd all really like to get to know you a little bit better now, and thought we could kick off with our first little poll. Clarice. So we have a couple of questions for you. And the first is, what is your firm size? After that, you'll find, let's see. Okay. I really need glasses, apparently. But okay, so we really have a variety of firms, but it seems like we were expecting some smaller numbers, but we actually have a fair amount that have over 200 in the room. I don't know if you all can see that. So that's good to know. And the second question is, at your firm, who typically writes the submissions? So it looks like the majority of the submissions are really being handled by the PR and communications folks or the BD folks, which is probably no surprise. I always find it interesting to see how many PR and communication folks are doing this. And the last question is, do you contribute to the submissions process? Sorry. No, but we're obviously then talking to the right people. So thank you for that, because it gives us a little bit more background on all you. So the first thing that we really wanted to kick it off with is we wanted to ask Laura and Cindy what it means to be recognized in your guides. And maybe Cindy, you can kick it off.
Fabulous. Well, as you may or may not know, Super Lawyers has a patented selection process, and pursuant to that process, we select no more than, excuse me, 5% of the attorneys, and we do it on a rolling schedule regionally, basically. So it really is an exclusive honor to be on the list. We have a process that is designed to get nominations, and we have our own independent research, and we also do peer evaluations through a process that we call our Blue Ribbon Panel. So in the end, like it or not, like the name or not, we're here to stay, and we really are incredibly pleased to be doing our lists throughout the entire United States and also in the UK. It's an honor to be on our list, and I do believe that those who take the time to understand our process really do recognize and see that.
Similarly to what Cindy's just said, it's important, I think, with ranking organizations like ours. It's an important designation of quality, judged by somebody outside of yourself and your mother, unless your mother is the GC of Pfizer or something, in which case she's welcome to talk to us. But for Chambers, I think that being ranked in our guide is, as I said, an independent verification of the quality of the work that you're doing, based on both the work that you've carried out over the past year, and of course also on the feedback of your clients and and of other market commentators. It's just an independent stamp of approval that I think means a lot, obviously to the to the partners at your firms, as you'll know, but also to the clients who are familiar with our organization and respect it as an independent and authoritative guide on who's good at being a lawyer.
Thank you, ladies. So we thought we'd really get right to it, but the caveat is we will be watching anybody who leaves the room too early. And so wanted to kick it off with asking really one of the more substantive questions, which is, what are some of the biggest mistakes law firms are making in their submissions or their approach? Laura, you want to kick us off?
Oh, sure. As you can see on the slide up there, the first thing is information overload. And I think that this really sort of ties in with the second point as well, which is lack of focus. One of the messages that I really want to get out to the market is the volume of information that we are sent. We receive about 10,000 submissions every year from over 850 different firms. And what you want to be sure of is that what you are saying to us is not getting lost in the shuffle. So as I said to somebody earlier, brevity is the soul of wit and of Chambers submissions. I'm pretty sure Shakespeare said that. But it's important to stay focused and to make sure that all of the information that you're giving us is meaningful. So take a look at it and think, is this just fluff? Is this going to be something that influences the ranking process? Or is this just me giving somebody sort of rehashed information that might not be influential? So the best use of your time is to put together something concise and informative. And the biggest mistakes is really sending us too much information or information that isn't relevant to what the researchers are looking for. Sort of tying into that is not using or closely mimicking, I'll say, our template, which does ask for all of the information that we do want and omits the information, more importantly, that we do not want, lawyer biographies being the highest on the list. I'm sure we'll probably get into clients a bit more later, but choosing the wrong clients happens all the time. You don't need to treat the client referee list as a who's who. We get Saudi princes, we get Warren Buffett. These guys are not answering our emails. And if they do, they're going to know the one guy that's been their lawyer for 35 years. And we'll say nice things about that one guy, but aren't going to give me much substantive information about the firm as a whole or about your team as a whole. So strategically picking clients that will give us a breadth of qualitative feedback is super, super important.
Great. Cindy?
Sure. I would echo some of what you have to say, my colleague. I think one of the biggest mistakes is pushing for every lawyer in the firm without actually deciding who really is worthy of the nomination, right? And so when we get a litany of information from a marketing person that just has everybody in the firm on it as a must-have, we don't take that very seriously, right? I mean, we've talked about this before. We know who we can trust because we see the submissions and they're serious and it's good information and thought has been put into it. So I would say really think about who are the key players that are deserving of these awards and put them forth so that they can receive the attention that they deserve and it's not diluted in the mix of everything else. One of the other things that you may not have a problem with large law, but that we do at Super Lawyers is the lack of participation. And contrary to too much information for Super Lawyers is your best friend, right? We're only as good at making our selection as the information we have. With that said, we want relevant information. And we make it very easy to let you know what it is that we want. We have an online submission system which walks you through the things that we look for in research. We have a very sophisticated database, and we will drill directly to the lawyer biography, so we don't need you to send us the lawyer biography. There's this thing called the internet out there, and we can find it. So I would encourage you to just keep those up to date. And again, just relevant information, the heart and the meat of the practice. There's lots of fluff that's out there, but really we want to know the heart of what we do is representative clients, matters, transactions, that sort of thing. So should we segue into what's a great approach as opposed to the biggest mistakes, or do we want to continue to chat up on the biggest mistakes? Nigel?
Yeah, I just want to, obviously, so my business is advising, I have a lot of firms I advise, small, large, in the US, around the world. And, the most common mistakes that I see when firms come to me and say we need help, Laura and Cindy have both touched on it really. It's the whole idea of focus really. I think firms they think that either by providing as much information as possible, that's going to somehow persuade the researchers that they're doing loads of great work, but actually the researchers haven't got the time to look through all the stuff that they are being sent. All you need to send, and I say this to firms time and time again, is just all you need to send is what sort of sets you apart, what makes you different, what's going to be persuasive to a researcher, whether it's the messaging, what particular areas in your practice are particularly strong, what are you better at than other firms in your space. And the same applies to the deals, or the cases that you're putting forward. There's no point in putting forward a 15-page description of each matter because the researchers just aren't going to read it. You just need to be really concise and focused about, what is this deal about and why was it important? And if you can't answer either of those two questions, then you've got to sort of ask yourself whether that deal or that case is actually the correct one to put into a submission. So just really, it's really, for me, all about focus and as Laura and Shakespeare said, brevity is incredibly important.
Any questions from our audience before we go on to the do's? Okay, in the front row. So the question was, is there such a thing as being too brief?
For me, absolutely. If you look at the submission template, there's sort of a decent chunk of space for you to write the deal highlight write-up. And you should be using all of it. My advice is always sort of 2 paragraphs, not overly lengthy. 1 that's the actual nuts and bolts of what you've been doing. This gets left out all the time, and if I can be very frank with you for a minute, when information like that is left out, it looks like it's because you don't want us to know what exactly you were doing because you weren't doing something important. So make sure that you're filling that in, because I'm a Chambers cynic, but that's probably not fair generally. Luckily, the researchers are a lot more doe-eyed than I am. But the second paragraph should really be what makes the work that you are doing interesting, unique, compelling, what differentiates the work that you have from what other people were doing. So definitely do write some meaty information in there. We do have a word count on the template. I get asked all the time, what happens if you go over it? I don't actually know. I don't think anything really happens. But as I say, you don't want to be the firm that the researcher nods off at their desk in the middle of, in the middle of reading your submission. So do try to be as concise as possible. But a one-sentence deal write-up probably isn't going to provide us with all of the information, particularly the more qualitative side of it about what's distinctive about your work.
Yeah, and I think just on that, I think it's important to remember who the audience is for these submissions. The researchers are generally really smart people, but they're also going to be less experienced in the particular areas than the lawyers are. And so a lawyer may think, if they mention, we handled such and such a case, they may know that that's the most important case of the past year in their jurisdiction, in their practice area, but the researcher probably won't know that. And so there is like an element of spoon feeding, I think, that needs to be done purely to make, it's kind of almost to give the researcher as little work to do as possible. You're saying, here's what we did, and here's why this matter was really important. So they don't need to go anywhere else. So I wonder what was important about that. I wonder if that was interesting. So it's just being aware that the researchers aren't going to have the level of detail or level of knowledge that you guys do.
I'm into the front row there.
So my friend has a big problem with confidential information. Well, I know you can put confidential, but still they're like 4 years. So when we can't name the client, would you recommend doing maybe someone we can name, maybe not as impressive, or doing the confidential one, but maybe they didn't say it?
So first the question was, if you have confidential information, is it better to not include that and instead include something else that might not be as impressive?
So I'll answer that one first on behalf of super lawyers. We understand that the submissions, put it this way, we presume that all the submissions that are coming our way are accurate and contain the right information, right? There's ethics rules that provide that. So we always tell folks that they can provide us the detail without naming the names. You can say, handled an estate planning matter for a client of X dollar amount involving complex claims of international blah, blah, blah. And we will take that to heart that you're not making that matter up, okay? And so there are ways around the confidentiality when making providing information to us, and we will take that at face value. Of course, if we ever found out that that wasn't really accurate, we'd have very distinct problems with that and and we do disqualify people if we ever find out that we've been given inaccurate information.
I'm so making up descriptions.
I didn't even think of that. It's brilliant.
From my perspective, we would absolutely prefer you to send in the better confidential stuff than the slightly less impressive named stuff. I get this question all the time, as you can imagine, and basically all it is that you want us to know that information for ranking purposes. It might mean that your editorial is a bit thinner. If you read through the white-collar crime editorial throughout the book, you'll notice that a lot of the firms don't even have any write-ups, because obviously that's not stuff that people want broadcast to our audience. But yeah, we do get confidential info all the time, every year. We treat it very, very sensitively, and we definitely prefer to get it and leave it out of the write-up rather than to not receive it.
Can I do one follow-up? One thing about us at Super Lawyers, any information that's given to the research department is confidential unless you choose to make something published in a broader showcasing of your practice. So Anything submitted to us is not going to be published. We write articles about lawyers who are selected to our list, and those are our editorial, they're fact-checked, they're gone through that whole process, but information given to our research team is maintained in our database, and it's not put out there publicly. So if you have information that you want to give us, as much detail as you can comfortably give to us, but know that it's confidential. I mean, quite honestly, I get, like you do, tomes that are delivered with a whole bunch of confidential matters, and every page is stamped confidential, confidential. We will give it to a researcher, they'll take care of it, they shred it. We treat with respect the request to keep things confidential, and it's only used for the research purposes.
In the back in the purple.
I have a question. So let's say you receive a submission from a practitioner firm that is regularly ranked as a top-tier practice and has partners that are regularly ranked as top-tier partners. And this submission includes many of the mistakes you have listed here. It has too much information, it has a lack of focus, it doesn't follow your directions and guidelines. However, the matters that are being discussed, even though they're discussed without focus all too long, are top-tier matters again. Would you penalize that firm for a mediocre submission?
I wish.
We have some funny responses we really could give on some of this.
I guess this is the deep dark secret, is that you could violate every single one of these rules, and if you're the best firm in the entire universe, you're going to be in band 1. There is an extreme, I don't know if they're in the room, there is one of the best firms in the universe doesn't even submit, like sort of famously doesn't even submit. They have more client feedback than all of the other firm in their table. They have more band 1 individuals than all of the other firms in their table. They've been in band 1 forever. They're like the best at this. They don't even, so that they're not, I mean, this isn't even like a glimmer in their eye, although hopefully it is. But no, I guess truth be told, you're never going to be penalized for sort of breaking, not following the suggestions that we're giving here. There could be things that are sort of related to this that could end up in you being penalized. If you haven't put a client name in, that happens all the time. Well, yeah, that's really one of the big things, is that you haven't put in a client name. Or if you haven't attached all of the names of all of the practitioners to a particular work highlight, you're indirectly penalizing them there, because we look for corroborating client feedback on the work that we're being given. So if you're not doing everything fully and sort of ideally, that's the way that you can be, and that in a sort of missed opportunity way, but certainly not in a, oh, you wrote a 5-page long work highlight, we're dropping you out of band 1. We would never do that.
And just to follow up on something Nigel said, make it easier for the researchers, both your researchers and ours. We have real people that are doing this work, right? And so if you give the real people the information in an easily digestible fashion, it's just better, right? So they'll do their work. That's what they're passionate about. To dig through everything, but being concise helps.
Question about references. Or is your point about potentially being counterproductive or, more above it or on? I totally get that, and I'm constantly advising references to, put forward not only for the same ratings, about how we're going to respond to changes. But I often wonder if you're sort of like lower end. I mean, are there people that are too junior to put forward? Are there ever references that are not, significant enough that their feedback doesn't count as much?
And the question first was, are there people that are too junior to be listing as references? Whoa.
For me, not really, because everything contributes to the volume of feedback as a whole. Obviously, if we can get on the phone with Warren Buffett, that's going to be a pretty interesting stamp of approval. And we do a lot of GC interviews, of course, and they provide us with great overall market views and do a really nice comparative interviews talking about their legal purchasing and who they go to for what. But too junior, I don't think so, because it's if you've got a client that's paying you to do legal work, and if they're satisfied with that work that you're doing, and if they have firsthand knowledge of that work, then at the end of the day, that's what really matters to us.
Let's move on to what the secret is to a great submission. Cindy, you want to kick us off?
Sure. Well, very clearly we have different processes, right? So we at Super Lawyers will send out an email saying nominations are open. I'd like all of you to just think about this as an ongoing process. I think one of the things that is a burden for you, if you feel like you're on this deadline and you've got to just get all of the information to us all at once, that's not the way we necessarily work. When our magazine hits you in whatever state you happen to be in, that's when nominations are open for the next year. And make sure you understand that nominations are just one part of the phase of selection. So, you know, right away when that magazine comes out, start thinking about next year and encourage folks to go online and make their nominations and you know, ease that process so it's not just all done at the very last minute, right? Because I know that can really be a burden. And then think of our research process as ongoing as well. And I know, again, our process is a little bit different, but because we have this online submission form, when there are real-time events, you can go in, or your lawyers can go in online and tell us this case was just won, or this transaction just closed, or whatever the case might be, and that is immediately sent to our research team and is updated on that lawyer's record, right? So we have a site called my.superlawyers.com, and as marketers, you can actually get access in there to the individual lawyer's records through a firm management function, and so when things are happening, send a press release, for goodness sakes. I mean, just stuff that should just be part of the day-to-day ongoing. I mean, we get lots and lots of press releases, but a researcher looks at every single one of them, puts them in the firm's and the lawyer's records, and it's a really easy thing to do to provide information to us.
Can I just jump in? I think that's a really good point. It's something that I really try and advise firms on a lot, is not to treat the submission as a kind of a once a year dump of information where everyone's kind of running around at the last minute trying to find 15 great deals to put into a submission to send to Laura or send to Cindy or whatever, you know. I always try and advise firms to treat it as almost like a live document, and so gather deals throughout the year, put them in one place. You know, it's effectively a data management system. But, you know, if you can do that and try and get into a best practice of continuing to gather deal descriptions, trying to save them in a way that is compatible to a directory submission, it means when you come to do this, when the submission deadline rolls around, you're not suddenly trying to get in touch with all the partners in that group and saying, okay, tell me what you've done, and then trying to work out which of the 15 best deals to put in the submission. You should already have the list. You know, you may have a list of 30 deals, but at least then you're starting from a point of you need to cut the information down, which is a lot easier than trying to sort of find it all from scratch. So I've always tried to be a big advocate of that and not just doing it all at the last minute.
Right tier one, but trying to get the attorneys to actually do that tier one work into it, it seems to be a disconnect, and you're submitting them year after year, and we're being ranked, but some of the individual attorneys who are actually doing that work are not, even though the work is connected.
When that happens, it's basically because, and the inverse is true as well, when you have individuals ranked but not the team, is that the feedback is not being appropriately targeted. So if I looked at your client referee spreadsheet, I might find that you're spreading those referees too thin, for instance. You only get 15 per practice area. If there's an individual that you look at and you think, how on earth is she not ranked? Look at these other clowns that they have in there. This woman is being seriously overlooked. You need to give her more real estate on that referee spreadsheet, because it is the client feedback that is going to be, you know, the sort of the thing that makes or breaks somebody's entry into the table. I also say that it is cumulative to get into the Chamber's Guide. We do look for multiple years of consistent positive feedback. We want to make sure that people aren't just a flash in the pan. You're also welcome to sort of contact me or contact my deputies if there are, and this does happen all the time, there's a specific, it's always like, you know, there's one person you're thinking, what Lord do I have to do? Feel free to get in touch with me. I'm happy to take a look at our records and say, oh, actually, you know, she's really on the cusp of being ranked. Just do whatever you did last year again this year, and I think that she'll come in. So there's, you know, there's a lot going on behind the scenes. We have specific ways to highlight particular individuals to be further investigated in upcoming guides. But if you've been trying and not having luck, I would suggest refreshing the referees that you're giving us, and also making sure that the person that you really want to bring in is being given enough so that sort of statistically we'll get enough feedback.
Just one on the referees, can you just go over how it's working out? Because I know the whole system that they call them and you submit them later in the year, you're not going to get called in, or we're not going to tell you that, and that's where it does start getting very frustrating.
I think my life's greatest regret is disclosing the Chamber's 6-month no contact rule, because people get really, really hepped up about it. This is the least of your client contacting problems. When I'm at the end of my book and I'm looking back over everybody's rankings, we get about 200,000 clients. There are maybe a dozen, 20 that we've interviewed early in the year, didn't do a good enough job on, and therefore have missed out on somebody's nationwide climate change comment. But guess what? When that happens, I turn around to the researcher that didn't do their job in the first place and say, you didn't get this climate change comment, email this person with a sycophantic, apologetic email, say, I'm really sorry I didn't get your climate change comment, and get the comment. The real problem is that we have such low response rates. We've got 200,000 people. The problem isn't that we're not doing the interviews properly. The problem is that we're not speaking to 120,000 of them. So the rule, basically, just to go through it briefly, my white whale, is basically the 6-month rule applies to interviews, by the way. It's not email. So if we have spoken with somebody in the past 6 months, generally speaking, this is not hard and fast, we will not contact them again to avoid bothering them. So what will happen is we start research in July. Let's say you're submitting, I don't know, Illinois tax. I don't know if that's in July. Let's pretend it is. So Illinois tax in July. We email them once at the beginning of July. I obviously tell the English people to wait till after the 4th. We don't hear from them. Halfway through July, we take a look and see who we did not hear from. The researchers will send a follow-up email saying, hi, I emailed you a couple weeks ago. I'm still very interested in speaking about this. We don't hear from them. That research ends. You've submitted this person for nationwide controversy as well. So that rolls around in November. It's still a bit close, but the researcher will be checking in again. So you don't get emailed at the beginning of November, maybe, or maybe you do, depends on how footloose and fancy-free the researcher is feeling. But they will be emailed at the end of November once sort of roughly, or actually, no, I lie. It's 3 months, no email. God, now I've just talked all that much and I have to backtrack, Laura. So it's 3 months if we haven't heard back on the email. So by the time we get to the nationwide research that you've also submitted this person for, we will email them again. So if it's been 3 months since we've emailed, have not heard back, we will send them an additional email. That researcher will then send another follow-up email. So usually by the time an unresponsive client has finished the Chamber's research process for the year, they've been emailed at least 4 times. And if it's somebody that we really want to talk to, they will have been emailed multiple times, because I instruct the researchers to, as I said, send fairly butt-kissing emails and say, oh, you know what, I'd really like to speak with you. Please forgive the multiple emails. They don't go overboard, don't worry about it. But we want to speak to the clients. We will do as much as we can to do it. And there's never a hard and fast rule. I had, I was revisiting my New York M&A ranking notes at the end of January, and I said to the researcher, oh, actually, I really want to get a comment from this person. They didn't reply. Can you please follow up with them? And they did, and we spoke to them. So trust us that we want to talk to as many people as possible. We don't want to piss them off, but we will try our best within the bounds of respect to speak with them. And you needn't worry about the no contact rule. Really, you should more worry about putting forward the right folks in the first place. I'm sorry that took 25 minutes.
And no, Laura, on this, I think it does bring up a good point. which is really, again, what's back in the hands of everybody in this room to help control is how people can encourage their clients to talk to chambers. And maybe, Nigel, you can chime in there, some of the ideas that.
Yeah, I mean, I think I kind of see it as a three-stage process, right? I see it as the first step in the process should happen a few weeks, actually, as you're putting your submission together. You know, I think we talk a lot about submissions, which is i.e. the written document containing deals and so on. But I think at the moment where you start putting the submission together, you should also be lining your lawyers up to say, start thinking about which of your references you want to put forward, because otherwise the references can get forgotten about, and so the submission is all great and it's perfectly written and it's really brief and all that sort of stuff, and then you think, oh my God, we need to get 15 references. So I would say that's the first step, which should happen, a month or so before the deadline. Start getting your lawyers to think about the references. Step two, and I think there's a real tendency to hit send on a submission, and because you've got so many submissions to do, you hit send on a submission and you think, thank God that's over for another year, and you move on to something else. But there's some steps that you can take after the deadline which, in my experience anyway, vastly improves the client response rate. First step, I would say, broadly speaking, there's a month gap between the submission deadline and the research starting. So for a submission that's due July 1, research will typically start at the beginning of August, right?
Yeah.
What I would advise is, I would say about 2-3 weeks after the submission deadline, the name of the researcher typically will appear on Chambers' website. What I would then do is get back in touch with your partners and say, okay, you need to get in touch with your client references again and tell them the following. Basically, thanks for agreeing to be a reference. Chambers research is about to start. The research that's going to be contacting you is X. This is the sort of thing you're going to be asked. Look out for this email. This is the one we want you to reply to. So that should happen probably, 2 to 3 weeks after the submission deadline. Step 3, let's take the July 1 submission deadline again. So we're now, research has started middle of August. Check in with the researcher that's covering that area and say, how is the feedback coming for our Illinois tax submission? The researcher, because of confidentiality, won't tell you which clients have responded and which clients haven't, but they will tell you, we've heard from one of your references, in which case you need to get back in touch with your partners and say, hey, you need to give your clients another nudge. Or they might get back and say, we've heard from 10 of your references, which is a pretty high number, right? So in which case, then you might want to take a view, well, look, that's great feedback. If the researcher may say, look, we've got more than enough feedback, there's been a lot of, a good volume of feedback. So those 3 steps, in my experience, make a big difference to the number of clients that respond. Obviously, you can't force the clients to respond. Ultimately, we're ultimately at the mercy of clients actually taking the time to respond to the email or speaking on the phone with the researcher. But taking those 3 steps, and particularly the 2 that come after the submission's gone in, are really important.
Also, some of you may have been in the room before, the session before this was all about storytelling. Can we talk a little bit about how storytelling can play a role in putting together a good submission?
Yeah, shall I? I'll carry on, shall I? So, one of the things, and it's kind of linked to what we've said before, about the researchers not necessarily being smart, but not necessarily, having deep experience in the particular areas. I think it's really important to treat the submission to put everything you write into context. So you should really be sort of almost like make the submission as interesting as you can for the researcher to read. And it comes back to that point about making it easy for them again, And that's not just a question of brevity. It's a question of saying, well, look, here's what we're really great at. Here's what sets us apart. Here's the work to back it up. And here's some interesting deals that we've done. And here are some client references that will tell you about how great we are in this area, why they hired us for this particular type of work. So I think the more kind of contextual stuff you can put in, the better. Because otherwise, all you're ending up with is either a laundry list of deals without context, which a researcher may not either bother reading or not understand the importance of unless they're told, or you end up with a submission that's full of kind of generic stuff, sentences which, strike fear into the hearts of researchers are things like, we should be ranked in tier 1 because we're an active practice that advises a lot of big corporate clients. It's like, well, so does everyone else that's going to be submitting in this area. So it means nothing, you know, whatever you put into your submission. I think if you put it into context, talk about why you're different, talk about what makes you great, talk about what makes you better than the other firms that you're ranked alongside, talk about why you deserve to be in the table. If it's an area that you're not ranked in, you want to look at the firms in the table and say, well, look, you know, we should, if you put those guys there, you should put us there as well. And explain it and say, well, this is why we feel that we have this story to tell, which is at least as compelling as those firms. So it's all about, again, making it easier for the researcher, but putting it into context all the time.
Question on the dues.
Actually, since I've been doing the Chambers Roadshow a bit more over the past couple of years, it's really improved. Following the recommendations that Nigel just told you about, those are the ones that I also make. The following up with the researchers about response rates during the research period has really increased our rate of responses. And in fact, there's sections that we've based, like New York litigation, which is our bête noire, used to be 3 months, now it's 4 months. There's 5,000 clients in that section, and the response rate has absolutely skyrocketed. So it does work to do this. It does work to follow those steps and to be more proactive with liaising with the researchers. And if you don't hear back from them, you're always welcome to contact me, or one of my deputies will give you that same info. But it has really increased the response rates, which is tremendous for us and obviously for the firms as well. While I'm here, I'm just going to sort of piggyback on the whole narrative thing for a minute, if you'll indulge me. One of the things, in addition to what Nigel said, to be mindful of is how you're viewed in the market and targeting your submission to address that. What I mean by that is, and this comes up a lot when I'm talking to Texas firms, for instance. So let's take a Texas firm that wants to be ranked in, Texas just walked in, sorry, that wants to be ranked in nationwide capital markets, right? Guess what everyone in New York is saying about you? They do MLPs. That's all they do. But you don't do all MLPs. You do a bunch of different stuff, and you've got a really awesome practice. But everybody thinks that you only do one thing because some of your lawyers wear actual cowboy hats to the office. It's fine. You need to be mindful of what everybody else thinks about you and put together a submission that says, hey, I know that we're awesome at this. Please go see our Texas debt and equity submission if you'd like to see the completely phenomenal work that we're doing in this area. However, look at all of this other stuff that we're doing. And it happens all the time for other firms. You're great at M&A. You've got an antitrust practice. Prove to me that your antitrust practice isn't just tangential to your great M&A practice. Things like that. Be aware of what your firm is good at, how that might shape the impression that we have of other practices that might be complementary, and make sure to argue how well your practices stand by themselves. And if you think that you're being pigeonholed, make sure that the submission demonstrates the actual breadth of your practice if you think that maybe we're not getting the right impression of what you're actually doing.
Great. Any more questions on the dues? Great. So, you know, we've talked a little bit about references, and I think that one of the sort of holes that law firms fall into is getting a little bit too focused on the submission. Can you talk a little bit about, both Cindy and Laura, about how important references are to your process? Maybe Cindy, you can kick us off.
Sure. Well, we have very different processes, right? So we made a decision when creating our process that we were not going to go to clients because we didn't, quite frankly, unless we could do a blind ask of a client as opposed to one that was given to us by a firm or lawyer, we decided, rightly or wrongly, not to go after the client references. So instead, our process is designed to kind of be a whole system of checks and balances, which is pure nominations, which are top of the mind. We put no names in front of them. We just say, who do you think are the best? And all of that's capped, right? So it's not a runaway popularity contest. And then everyone who's in the candidate pool will be independently researched. Hopefully, lawyers or firms have given us additional information beyond those firm bios, but you know, being at Thomson Reuters, we have this thing called Westlaw and lots of other resources that are available to us at a click so that we can do some pretty good and in-depth research. But where we get our checks and balances from the peers is through that last step of our process. So we take everybody that's in the candidate pool and we put their names back out to other lawyers to give us evaluations, peer evaluations about them. So it's not a client evaluation, it's a peer evaluation.
And we had a question in the white.
We're not an exclusive club that we'll put it this way. We're not the club that once you're in forever, right? We have about an 8% turnover from year to year. And, you know, as you can imagine, people's practices ebb and wane. And some people retire, some people go into public service, some people become professors, and some folks just don't have as strong of a year as they had before. We're not stupid. We don't drop all of the information from year to year. We don't make a brand new selection. We carry data over, but we do make the selection based upon the most current year's data. So, you know, if somebody had just a record year and we got a lot of information about them, that can impact their selection. And ultimately, Super Lawyers is a point process, and you can get points through the nomination phase, again cap, not popularity, through the research phase, which actually carries a significant amount of weight, and through the peer nominations. And if you're taking the time to participate with us, if we're dealing with the point system, points matter, right? So the more information that we have and the greater peer recognition that there is for an individual, it can change from year to year, right? So we do have that turnover. Mm-hmm.
Perfect, but they said if they actually called other attorneys in the field, they would recognize those specific attorneys should not be on the list.
Right, and we don't actively telephone attorneys and ask them about it. So, I mean, our process is one where we will put the names in front of them, and there are times when we get negative evaluations on lawyers, even from within their own firm. And let me tell you, when I was selecting the list, when I'd see negative evaluations within the own firm, I mean, that's really telling, right? So we do actually look at that. You know, again, is any process going to be entirely 100% perfect, right? I can't guarantee it. We base the selection pursuant to our process on the information that we have. And, you know, if things come to light to us, I mean, we do license checks and we do discipline checks and all of that sort of stuff. You know, there are times when people will send us information that says, you know, this guy just really isn't all that great, and here's the reasons why. I mean, we'll look into it. But, you know, just informal things like that can't carry the same weight as the, you know, solid evidence that our research team is looking for. So, you know, it's not an entirely perfect science, but it's as close as we can really come to it. I will tell you one thing, though. Sometimes people think because we have a nomination phase, it's really great to just pad it, you know, just have the entire firm orchestrate, you know, who's voting, who's nominating who, and all that sort of thing. But we track that in our database. So we can track who's making nominations for who, we can see who's doing the blue ribbon panel evaluations. And I'll tell you, you know, it's amazing how lawyers and some marketing folks send emails around saying, hey, the process is open, will you nominate me? And that's unseemly. That's not a thing that we actually encourage people to do. We actually say don't campaign. And if those emails come to us, we have a policy that the particular lawyer is disqualified for the year. So just know that it's not fun to make those phone calls and say, knock it off, you gotta, you know, this is not helping you, but we take it seriously.
I love the accidental CC, by the way. It is my favorite thing in the universe. Yes. Ooh, you did not want me to see this.
Oh, yes.
Love it.
Yeah, Laura, could you talk a little bit about the role of the references in Chambers process?
Sure, of course. A question that I get a lot is what's more important, peer feedback or client feedback? It is, and I swear, client feedback. You know, we get a lot of people that are very concerned about sour grapes, et cetera, et cetera. And what I say to people is, ultimately, the clients are the one paying your bills, and they're the ones whose opinions we value most. I will say that the people are really willing to give credit where it's due, though. It's not sort of like unicorn rare to get, to get sort of negative feedback. It does, of course, crop up, but people are actually very generous. I think the attorneys mostly know that one person's ranking isn't really affecting their own ranking. You get brought up on your own merits, not because somebody else is crap. But the client feedback is the most important. If we have one person, if we have an attorney say, or well, obviously somebody in private practice say, oh, they're awful, I was across from them on a deal and there were 10,000 associates and none of them knew what they were talking about and it was a complete, circus. And we turn around to the client and we always ask them things like, how did you find billing? How did you find staffing? Was that all good? And they say, oh, it was absolutely fantastic. They staffed really leanly and the more junior folks that they brought on knew exactly what they were doing. I didn't feel like I was paying to train people. I thought they did an outstanding job. Which one are we paying attention to? The person that actually knows, the person that actually interacted with that firm on a day-to-day basis. So the client feedback is ultimately the absolute most important thing for us. Which is why we sort of belabor the point on the referee process, et cetera. But peer feedback certainly does contribute. It contributes a lot of the volume. But as I said, people are, generally happy to give praise to their peers in the market. And if we get repeated negative peer feedback from multiple sources from across the board, we do pay close attention to that. And that is something that we will take seriously. When you know that it's not somebody that's got an axe to grind, we will take a look at that. But even in cases where sort of famously, people might have been going through disciplinaries or something, we actually do innocent until proven guilty. We will keep somebody in the book if they haven't been sort of found guilty of anything yet. Obviously provided that they have the good client feedback to keep them in there, because they probably don't have the good peer feedback to keep them in there. But yeah, the clients are the most important thing for us.
Thanks for that, Laura. And wanted to move on to another poll, quick question, which is, what is your biggest pain point regarding the various rating services? Is it managing the submission process and resources, managing attorney expectations, or understanding the process? She said, can you select multiple? We should have had it all of the above. Okay. Whoa.
Managing.
Yeah. So it looks like it's managing the process overall. And Nigel, what do you think of that answer?
Yeah, I'm not surprised. Obviously, one of the most firms, when they approach me because they need help, is because either they've forgotten about a deadline, or maybe their key directories person has just left and they're in a complete flap about being able to get through all the work. They're worried about the fact that they have just too many submissions to do at a particular given time, because obviously certain crunch times throughout the year. So yeah, I'm not really surprised. I think that managing the submissions is obviously a challenge, whether you're a firm with 10 lawyers, 100 lawyers, or 1,000 lawyers. Each firm of different sizes have different challenges, but it's a tough one. So thanks, Laura.
Yeah, and we're conscious of time. We just have 5 minutes left, but on that question, that leads us to sort of our next question, which is, what can firms do to make the submission process less painful? And maybe you can take a stab at answering that for us.
Yeah, I think we've got them up on the screen. Obviously these are all important. I would say, number one, starting the process early is giving yourself enough time to pull the stuff together. Because even if we follow all of the guidance, keeping the submissions brief, making sure you're keeping on top of maybe which deals to put in throughout the year, all of that stuff, it still takes a while to get as you all know, to get the submissions together, get the partner approvals, deal with any potential kind of internal partner politics between, who's going to get pushed for a ranking, because as we know from Cindy and Laura, you can't just simply throw every single name at the directories, because that's not going to work. You have to be strategic about who's had a great year, who really deserves to be ranked, who's got the work, who's got the references. So all that stuff takes time. Starting the process early is absolutely fundamental. And actually, I would say the other one, the third one on that list, educating your lawyers. I think there's a real I think there's still a bit of a disconnect between what the lawyers think is going to happen. And if you do everything right, if you put a great submission together, does that mean you're automatically going to be propelled into band one? Of course it doesn't, because there's still elements of, I think the question from before, if a firm that is, the number one M&A firm in the world, if they decide not to do a submission, do they suddenly become a bad firm and they're going to be dropped? Of course not. And by the same token, there are certain firms who may do really great work in a limited area that might get them onto the list, but they're probably never going to be up there in band one, simply because they may not be big enough, they may not have the huge deals, or they may not have the huge level of complexity of deals, whatever it might be. So, and I think that managing expectations with the partners and educating them about, how the process works and what to expect is a really important fact.
Can I just want to jump in on one thing. You can use, we have real people who answer telephones and respond to emails. And if there's a situation where, in terms of managing the attorneys at the firm, so I'll just put this example out there. If someone didn't make it and they're pounding on your door saying, why, contact us. We can actually give you a report which says, here's the information we had at the time of selection and here's where you fell short. So, or put the attorney in front of us and let us be the bad guys. We have those conversations all the time. And I'm serious about that. It is not a big deal for you to say, I want you to hear it from the horse's mouth. Let's call the Super Lawyers research team and see what they have to say. And then educate them about the process so that they can understand the importance of it. Because it's, it's not like you guys can just do a magic wand and make this all happen. We understand it's work, right? And so use us to help you if that's appropriate for you.
And on that, as we're nearing the end of our session, can you both just recommend what you think the best way is for firms to approach you?
Oh, genuinely, probably by phone. I've got about 400 unread emails in my inbox, probably from a lot of people in this room. Seriously, call me in the afternoon. If I answer the phone, I'll answer your question right then. And I really hate red exclamation mark emails. I'm just putting it out there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. For us as well, we have several ways. It's all on our website. I have my direct line right there on the website. The calls I get are kind of amazing from around the country. But we answer our phones, and we have a research team as well that you can reach by email. But you can get directly in touch with our editorial team if there's story pitches that you want to make, because our editorials, you can't buy your way onto the cover of our magazines. Our editorial is true editorial. We have a great team there, so that's a great place to pitch your stories about the individual lawyers, and we love to tell those stories. So go online and you can find a bazillion ways to be in touch with us.
That's great. Well, okay, we'll do one last question. In the back.
This is really specific for Laura. Is there any plan by the Chambers organization to automate the submission process to help facilitate the time we spend together?
As in, put it online so that it's sort of a collaborative effort? Oh, probably in a wonderful dream world of magic and rainbows, but not immediately. So I would absolutely love that. I get this all the time. Can we do online subs? Can we do online scheduling? I would give my right leg to do that. I don't think we're going to be doing it anytime soon, but we're in a constant process of overhauling the worst website in the world, and one never knows. I'll also say I'm happy to stay after if other people have questions.
Right, yeah, no. So unfortunately, we're at the end of our time, but thank you all so much for your time, and really looking forward to seeing you all at the reception, sponsored by Super Lawyers.